O Mangalam Guru Devaya Devye Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindebhyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankaracharama Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Deva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha Om Bhadra Kali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Vedanga Vedanta Vidyasthana Evacha Sri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namaha Sri Bhuvaneshwariye Namaha. So we're picking up after a very long time with our Devi Gita classes. We started these Devi Gita classes several years back. I think we've done maybe about 50. I forget the number. I didn't have it in my thing, but about close to 50 classes, plus or minus. We took a short break to go to India. But then we went to India, I think 2 or 3 times before we're picking this up. And there's one devotee who hopefully is joining us tonight. Wrote me a very sincere email requesting that these classes, reminding us that these classes we're supposed to start up again. Like, oh yeah. So we're very happy to start them again. The reason we fell behind a little bit is just so many projects that things fall in the cracks sometimes. So we apologize. So if we do a quick recap. If anything, I don't do anything quickly, but we'll do a recap of where we are in the Devi Gita. And Devi Gita, some people are joining us for the first time. If you have it in you, there's many, like I said, we recorded many lectures, many of these classes before, if you want to skim through them and see what you're interested in reviewing. But the Devi Gita is 700 verses from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, which is an important, actually the very first lecture that we gave in the series, or class we gave in the series, will establish a lot of the textual history, the history of the text and its place within the larger Shakta tradition. And the translation we're mostly using, the one that I'll be more or less sharing, we occasionally make a little adjustments to it, is from by C. Mackenzie Brown. This is my well-used copy. There's this copy, the Song of the God, the Devi Gita, the Song of the Goddess, translation, annotation, and commentary. This is what I would suggest people get if you want to follow along. I gave on the student page for this course. There's a PDF, a downloadable PDF of his translation. Of his translation, but not the commentary and the notes, right? But you can see you can see the translation where you are and what the next verses are coming. I also gave a PDF of the translation of this section from his huge translation of Srimad Devi Bhagavatam by Swami Bhajanananda, disciple Sri Ramakrishna. So you can kind of compare those kind of two main translations that are there. One quite antiquated now, probably published in the 20s or something. And this C. Mackenzie Brown, who specializes in goddess traditions and in Puranas. All right. And so the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam is a very large text, 18,000 verses, copying that number and its name from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the famous Vaishnava devotional text, right? And just like the Bhagavad Gita is 700 verses from the 100,000 verse Mahabharata, and the Chandi is 700 verses from the I forget Markandeya Purana. I forget the number of verses of the Markandeya Purana. So similarly, this is another 700 verses pulled out from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, and in it, the Devi Gita, the Devi herself is speaking. It's the song of the Devi or the message of the Devi, and the form of the Devi speaking is Bhuvaneshwari. That's the supreme deity of this Purana, of the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. And the Puranas are generally, and I think maybe universally, sectarian texts. And we're not trying to use the word in a negative way. The word sectarian carries a negative context in the way I think of it. Here I mean sectarian in academic ways. I mean, it's meant for a particular community, right? In this text, the supreme goddess is the Bhuvaneshwari, and many of the similar stories we've heard, maybe we've read in other texts from the other sources, are retold, but with a different purpose. Everybody tells a story. We all have like a group of stories, and whatever point you want to make, you pull from those stories to illustrate your point. So the authors, the rishis and authors of these texts, these conversations are the same thing. They pulled from the reservoir of mythic stories, of traditional stories, in order to illustrate their point. And in this particular text of Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, there is a couple main themes that these stories are told again and again. I'll tell you one of the themes, an interesting theme, is that she's the goddess here, Bhuvaneshwari, is the supreme controller of everything. She is the doer of everything, right? And nothing happened without her. And she is not only the doer of everything, right? She's like the Chandi, she's Mahavidya, the supreme knowledge and the giver of knowledge, and she's Mahamaya, or the supreme illusion. Today, actually, our theme is Maya, used a little differently in today's verses. And so in the Chandi, it says that Maya, that Devi, who's called Maya, Mahamaya, deludes even the minds, throws the minds of even sages and rishis into ignorance, right? And so that's scary to think about, that even sages and rishis, but our favorite stories and our favorite rishis in the Devi Bhagavatam end up being thrown into delusion and doing very foolish things, right? To show that it's a Devi, that even people, omniscient, all-powerful rishis are deluded. Even Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma are deluded by her, by this power of Mahamaya, right? That's one of the themes of the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. Another theme is that she is the substratum of everything, right? Everything exists within her. She's the womb. She is the space of consciousness. Some places he's described Chidakash, the space of consciousness, right? Within that space there's consciousness. And today, actually, a lot of the themes of today's reading will be about the nature of consciousness and awareness that is her, right? Another aspect, quickly mention anything because these will be important to understand a very different move she's going to make in the verses that we're going to read today, is that it's also I'm not fond of this term, but we can use it technically. It represents a stage of Sanskritization within the Shakta tradition, and this is a term. It's a complicated term and a controversial term, but this is the idea that there's indigenous, or what we call small traditions in India, that are independent or adjacent to or alongside or not identical to the dominant Sanskrit Brahminical tradition, right? And when something, in order to gain legitimacy, right, these texts get written into these traditions get Sanskritized, get written into Sanskrit, uses the language, uses the terminology like this, right? And so that's one thing is, and therefore these lesser traditions, I'm not using the word pejoratively, technical term, lesser traditions get associated and they get the prestige of the larger Sanskrit tradition. That's often the way that Sanskritization is discussed, right? With the Shakta tradition, we also hold that the Sanskrit tradition also works another way, is that it's these lesser traditions like indigenous Shakta traditions, tribal traditions like that, that by using the language of the dominant Sanskrit tradition, claim it. That, it's not like, oh no, like the goddess is also mentioned in the Vedas, right? The Vedas are one of her aspects, right? The Vedas come from her, right? So it's not just a way of taking the prestige of a dominant Sanskrit tradition. It's also absorbing it into these lineages. So I think that's and the Devi Bhagavatam is a classic example of both these things happening. It's considered like almost one of the major texts to demonstrate this happening in the Shakti tradition, right? So what happened so far in the beginning of the story, a great demon has been born, Sati, Shiva's first wife, or his only wife, but in her first incarnation, has committed sati, has jumped into the yajna fire of being insulted by having heard the insult of Prajapati Daksha, her father, and she commits a ritual suicide and emulates herself. That story is there, told many different ways. And Shiva is completely bewildered and plunged into grief and confusion. And then he goes into a cave, into the Himalayas, and just starts meditating, right? Forgetting this world, right? Forgetting, not looking for the Devi manifest as this world, just meditating on her as his very consciousness and self, with eyes closed, not with eyes open, right? In the meantime, taking advantage of this inauspicious moment where the goddess has seemingly, at least with her visible nature, has been withdrawn, right? And that's a very dangerous situation, right? So a demon has come up, Tarakasuta, and he does extreme austerities and gets boons. I believe the boon is from Brahma in this. It's been a few years since I've read these verses. I think pretty sure it's from Brahma, and the boon he gets is, for starters, that like the demons always have the same boon. Let me be immortal, right? He says, I can't. No, nothing's immortal. Even I'm not immortal. How can I make you immortal, right? So they come up with clever schemes, like in the Hiranyakashipu was, let me not be killed by day or by night, and by animal, by human, on the floor, on the ground, or in the sky. All these things, trying to figure out a way not to be killed, right? Still, eventually, everyone will has to die. So his boon was that I could only be killed by the legitimate son of Shiva, right? Thinking, well, Shiva has no son, right? He has no wife, what to speak of a son, right? Even if he had a son, he has no wife. There's no legitimate son of Shiva. Therefore, he thought he was safe. And with that boon, he attacked the demons and became Lord of the demons. He attacked the humans. We're easy prey. Becomes Lord of the humans, and then even attacks the realm of the gods. And because nobody can kill them, nobody can kill him, not even the gods. He wins the rulership of the heavenly realms also. And in that time, the gods retreat into the Himalayas. And we've given many talks on our first talks are on these themes, right? And symbolic meaning of going to the Himalayas. And they do tapasya for 1,000 divine years, right? Tremendous tapasya and a long list of sadhanas. The types of sadhanas that many of us are probably doing: japa, caitanyasya, puja, havan, meditation, fasting, recitation. These are the sadhanas that the gods were engaged in, right? And then the goddess appeared, right? Pleased by their austerity, or when they reached a certain level of purity, their own purity, they got to see that which is hidden become manifest. And she first appeared as an infinite pillar of light, right? And then in the text, it describes that pillar of light to be the very nature of consciousness mentioned as Brahman in the Upanishad, once again, establishing her as the Brahman of the Upanishads. Then that light, and it says, dazzling, blinding them, all the gods became blind. It was shining with the red hot intensity of 10,000 suns, yet cooling like 10,000 moons, tinged by the light and crackle of 10,000 hits of lightning. So it's very dramatic, quite a dramatic experience, right? Become totally overwhelmed and blinded. Slowly, the image, that infinite pillar of light, took on the form of a woman, right? It took on the form of Bhuvaneshwari. And then we spent a lot of time, many weeks, describing her incredibly detailed iconography. She has 4 hands, what she holds in her hands, what she has 3 eyes, what jewelry she's wearing, what tilak she's wearing, what betel nut mixed with certain types of spices she's chewing, right? All these details are given, beautiful details in meditation. And then she asks, "Oh gods, I'm pleased with your austerity. Please, what do you ask your boon?" Seeing her, they become overwhelmed, and they basically say, we've seen you, that's all we want. No, no, you did austerities for a purpose, right? Ask that purpose. I said, okay, there was a purpose. A demon has been born. He has a boon that only the legitimate son of Shiva. Shiva has no wife. So the only way to do that, you will have to take rebirth as take another birth, marry Shiva, have a child, have that child quickly grow up and kill the demon Tarakasura, and thus freeing us from our torment, and then we can again enter the realms of heaven and do our duties and enjoy the benefit, right? He says, "Okay, I shall," and he beautifully says, "I shall be born." And the Himalaya is they're in the Himalayas, so the Himalayas is the spokesperson for the story, for the gods, right? The conversations mostly happen to the Himalaya mount, the king of mountains, in as a representative of all the gods. He says, "I shall be born in your. Although I'm your mother, I should be born as your daughter." So we spent a lot of time on the bhav of that, right? There's a lot of bhav in the idea of a mother becoming the child, right? And how the infinite can be born in the finite, very mysterious devotional themes. So I'll be born as your daughter and be eventually grow up and marry Shiva, have a son. That would be Kartikeya, Skanda, and he will kill Tarakasura like this, right? But so now they have her vision. So then they take the advantage and ask her spiritual questions. Because fine, the demon came up, we need him killed. By your grace, you'll do this, right? But now that we've seen you, right, a whole nother level of spiritual aspiration awakens. Like we want to know what your real nature is. We want to know how to realize you. Right? We've seen you with this vision at the end of this of the Devi Gita. She disappears. The verse is something like she disappeared in the vision in front of all the gods. Right. So I see her and then they don't. So even this extremely peak, longed for thousands of years austerity, performed for vision, it's still a temporary vision. How do we know your essential? How do we become one with your essential nature? It has a non-dualistic meaning of the text, right? So they use this language. How do we love you? How do we know you? Explain. And so they ask a series of questions. Himalaya, that's their question. And then at the end of chapter 2, of chapter 1, she begins to answer those questions. So we're in verse 11 of chapter 2. So I'm going to do a share screen here. Hopefully it works. Everybody can see that? Good, good. So the title of this chapter, it's not, I don't think it's given in the Sanskrit original, but probably given by the translator, is the goddess as supreme cause of creation. Right. So that's the theme of this section. She'll answer many questions. She'll also answer the nature of the nature of Kundalini, of the eightfold system of yoga, of jnana yoga, of bhakti yoga, of yoga mixed with jnana, all these different of tantric worship compared to Vedic worship. They'll ask to see her universal form, very similar to Krishna's universe. Many things will happen, but it starts. First topic is that she is the foundation, the cause of creation. We've in previous verses actually mentioned different types of causes. Going to Aristotle's different cause, she's the material cause, she's the efficient cause, she's the direct cause, like that of creation, right? In yeah, so that's the theme that's going to be discussed, right? And I'm going to let's see here. I have to use. Just to catch us up, but we're on verse 11, so I'll just read in a brief way the previous 10 verses to remind ourselves. So the goddess Devu Vacha, the goddess is speaking, right? May all the gods and all the students gathered here today attend to what I have to say, right? This is important, right? By merely hearing these words of mine, one attains my essential nature, right? Madrupa-tvam, right? So and so this is again the flavor of this the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam has all kinds of spiritual goals discussed, right? But the Devi Gita has a lot of this type of language. It tends to be, I mean, it's devotional and focus on the supreme goddess, the personal goddess, Bhuvaneshwari, but the type of experiences being held out as ideal in this text are, you could say they're non-dualistic, but they're not even non-dualistic like although philosophically there's non-dualism presented as one of the schools of thought, but also like a samadhi, the type of spiritual experience where one feels lost and identical with her nature, that type of union. There's different types of union possible and different types of liberation mentioned in the scriptures. This is that language. I want to become one, like a drop of water Rumi uses the example of a drop of wine in an ocean of water. The wine disappears in the water, right? Or the water disappears in the wine like this, right? So it uses that language. One was my essential nature, right? And then it starts with the Vedantic cred of the Chandi of the god of Devi Bhagavatam. Aham evasya purvam tu. So I alone existed in the beginning, right? There was nothing else at all, O Mountain King, O Himalayas. So that's this statement. We'll go back to it. This is foundational to the actually, I would say it's not foundational to Advaitic schools, but it's also foundational to devotional schools, right? That there is, we find ourselves, right, in a world, Jeev and Jagat, right? There is a world of us and others, and other us's and other things, right? A world of multiplicity, right? How did that come to be? Right. And so the trick, like the cosmogonies. No, I didn't get it right. My tongue's not going to do it today. Cosmog. Anybody know I'm losing the words. Cosmogonies. That's not great. Anybody help me on this one? I'm tripping. My tongue is tripping. Anyway, the origin of the universe. What's that?
Cosmogony.
Cosmogony. Thank you. Thank you. I
don't know. I'm not sure, but
yeah. I'm going to sip coffee and see if I can clarify my brain here a little bit. I mean, it's how do we get a universe? The question is, how do we get a universe? Right? That's called cosmos, right? How do we get a cosmos? How do you get a universe, right? So there's many. So why is there anything instead of nothing? That's the first thing to do. There may be why, I mean, nothing seems better, things more likely than anything, something. So how do you get one thing out of nothing instead of nothing? And then, okay, if you have one thing, how do you get many things? So if you accept one thing, how does the one become the many? Or what is the many in light of the fact that it was originally one, right? And so a lot of these traditions, devotional traditions, theistic traditions, as well as non-dualistic traditions, it will usually state in the beginning, before there was anything, there was one, right? So here it is, I alone existed in the beginning, right? There was nothing else at all, O Mountain King. My true self is known as pure consciousness, right? As the highest intelligence, the one supreme Brahman. So I existed, I am consciousness, right? I am that extreme highest, most intelligent, and I'm the same as the Brahman, by the one supreme Brahman, right? That's like saying, not like saying, it's exactly saying, I'm the Brahman of the Upanishads, right? There's verses in the Upanishad starts, there's one supreme self before anything, right? Actually, the classic example of this in the Upanishad is from the Chandogya Upanishad, right? Sadeva somyeda dimarga uh, asideka meva advitiyam. Sorry, Vedic Sanskrit's not my specialty. Oh, Somya, this is the speaker, the disciple, right? Before this world was manifest, there was only existence, right? And then it says, eka eva advitiyam, only one without a second, right? Before there was anything, there was only consciousness. It was one, and there's no other. That statement is the great statement of the Upanishads, right? This being, right? then gets very early on in the Upanishads and throughout the Upanishad tradition gets identified with the Atman or Brahman, the self, right? And in later theistic traditions of the Puranas, it gets identified and connected to one or other personal supreme being, to Vishnu, to Shiva, right, to Krishna, to to Devi, here to Devi, right? So the one who existed before anything, right, is also the deity that we consider the supreme deity. That's what it means. What it means to become a supreme deity, to be the supreme deity, is before there's anything, there was only them. There's only one, right? So how does, anyway, let's go next verse here. Wrap that. I'm going to spend all this time introduction and never get to the verses. All right. Now describing some aspects or qualities of that one supreme consciousness. It is beyond reason, indescribable, incomparable, incorruptible. From out of itself evolves a certain power, renowned, famous as Maya. Right? This is the theme today. What is Maya? Right? And so here, out of this inconceivable, unthinkable, indescribable, indestructible, incomparable reality, evolves, comes out of it from within itself. Evolves means from within itself comes out some mysterious power, right? Known as Maya, right? Now starts defining Maya using very classic Vedantic standard, right? Also mentioned in the Bhagavatam, it's throughout the text, that Maya is neither real nor unreal, right? Nor is it both real and unreal. For that would be incongruous. Lacking such characteristics, this indefinite entity has always subsisted. Now, this term, neither real nor unreal, right? I mean, like if you ever read like Buddhism, it's like it's neither this nor that, nor this and that, nor neither near this nor and neither that. It trying to every possible logical conception, right? This is a very, very well thought out statement that it's neither real nor unreal. Um, uh, what is meant by real? We'll come back to this if we ever get to tonight's verses. What is meant by real? Real is um, 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 uh, so by saying that is neither unreal or I think it was says na sati na sa na sati, right? Neither sat nor asat, right? Is neither sat real nor asat. Sat asat has a very specific definition, right? Only Brahman, right, is Sat, right? Only Brahman is real, right? Because by real means that it is alone eternal and unchanging. We could say, oh, this is real, but it's not eternal and nor is it unchanging. So if my definition of real does not exclude eternal and unchanging things, I can say this is real, right? But if you're by here we mean eternal and unchanging. Right. And unreal, and unreal is something that totally doesn't exist, right? So what's the example? There's the famous example that's given by philosophers is like the child of a barren woman, the son of a barren woman, right? That's not a thing, right? It's just like something. It's not rare. It's not temporary. It simply doesn't exist. But Maya or the world, Maya is also is also means this world that we see, whatever Maya is, right? It's not real because it's not real. It's not sat according to this definition because it's not eternal, right? And it's not unchanging, and it's not unreal because it exists, right? It can be seen. It's something power, but it's not. It's not it's not like false like the son of a barren woman. Not like real. So it's because it's neither real nor unreal. Therefore, it may be considered it's maybe temporary, it may be elusive, but it's not unreal in that absolute sense. So I'm echoing on somebody. Okay, I think fixed. Um, um, and then she gives classic Shakta devotional, but especially Shakta devotional examples, right? So she starts teaching the world, this world, I alone existed. I create this world. This world of name and form is evolves out of me, out of my supreme consciousness, right? Out of by mysterious power of Maya. And now she describes Maya in a pure classical traditional Shakta way, right? You may remember this. This is also Sri Ramakrishna uses almost identical examples. As heat and here is in fire, as brilliance in the sun, as cool light in the moon, just so Maya adheres firmly in me, right? So Sri Ramakrishna used language like that Brahman and Shakti, or here this language is Brahman and Maya, right? They're not non-different, right? They're like he says, you can't think of one without the other. It's the same thing, right? There is a slight difference, but the difference is also is based upon an identity. Because in Christian theology, we have this idea of essence and quality and ethics, essence and quality, right? I'll get back to this in a second. But anyway, she starts with this very established way of doing it that's Maya is comes from her, is her, like sunlight is only the sun, like that, like waves are only water, this type of thing, right? So she identifies, and that's what we'd expect actually in Shaktism, in most forms of Shaktism. You'd expect that in when we think of Tantra, we often attribute a tantric ontology to be like this also, right? Right. Into that Maya, the actions of souls, the souls themselves, and the ages eventually dissolve without distinction, as worldly concerns disappear in deep sleep. By uniting with this inherent power of mine, by uniting with my own Maya, I become the cosmic seed. The seed here is the source. From that seed, the creation comes, right? By obscuring me its own basis, this power is prone to defects. This is a problem with Maya. It obscures the seed. By accepting this Maya, she becomes the seed of the world, right? The seed of creation. But the very nature of of Maya also makes us not see the one consciousness, and therefore that's its fault, right? We talked about that already. Um, Through its association with consciousness, Maya is called the efficient cause of the world, and through its evolution into the visible realms, Maya is said to be the material cause, right? She's the cause, all in by definitions. And then what she does, she defines it using classic Shaktism, view this type of Shakta perspective, right? Now she's going to list other views, different schools, various schools of thought. Uh, um, and we spent a lot of time, and we like showed you what school of thought holds this view, what texts illustrate it, and there's examples of it, right? So some call this Maya the power of austerity, right? Tapa. Others call it darkness. Still others dullness. Or some call it knowledge, or illusion, or matter, or nature, or energy, or the unborn. Each one of these is schools. There are schools, at least one or sometimes multiple schools that use this definition of Maya. Right? We went through them. Right? And then the one we ended on, he says, and those verse, and then she gives two more views. Those verse in Shaiva scriptures, the Shaiva traditions, declare her to be Vimarsha, or reflective awareness, right? And while those who contemplate the doctrines of the Vedas, the Vedantins, right? And by here, Vedantins here refers to Advaita Vedantins, it's clear by this, right? Declare her to be powerful avidya, ignorance, right? So one is reflective awareness, the other one calls it the Shaivite tradition, and the Vedantic tradition, the Advaita tradition of Advaita Vedanta, describe it as avidya, or ignorance, right? So and then we had a guest speaker. If you remember our last thing we ended before Ambikananda and myself went to Kashmir for our Amarnath Yatra, we had a guest by our friend George, a disciple of Swami Lakshmanju, to help us understand what the Shaivite scriptures mean by vimarsha, right? And how the one consciousness becomes many through the Māya of vimarsha, the Shakti within Shaivism. They have a very sophisticated way how the one becomes many, right? And Vedanta has a different sophisticated way of how the one becomes many or appears to become many, right? In Shaivism, in the Kashmir Shaivism that George helped us and Swami Lakshmanji helps us understand, it was how the one actually becomes a many. And in Advaita Vedanta, how the one at least appears to become the many through the agency of Māya. So this is where we um, um, left off, right? This is we did the first 10 verses, right? Right. We mentioned that in the Advaitic schools, right, how Maya is understood, right, and in the theistic schools, Vaishnavism and the theistic form of Shaivism and the theistic form of Shaktism, right, the devotional schools, right, Maya becomes it's also a power, a Shakti, but it becomes it's wielded if by the Supreme Being to create the world. It's used. Maya is controlled. It's wielded. And that Shakti, like in the classic language, we have Shakti and Shaktiman. You have the powerful, and its power, right? So power comes from the powerful or is used by the powerful to do something, to demonstrate power, right? So similarly, Maya is wielded, used by, it belongs to, and it's used by the deity in order to control, right? I think in the commentary he mentions in Mackenzie Brown's commentary, or in a footnote, I believe, if I remember properly, he mentions he references a quote in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vaishnava text. And I like that section I'm very fond of. So I got excited when I first read this a couple of years ago, preparing for the class we didn't get to, right? Um, um, uh, Sukadev, the speaker, is speaking to Vidura, right, about all kinds of interesting philosophical and spiritual devotional topics, right? And so he starts very similar. Now, this is the devotional text compared to a more Vedic type of text, right? But it says Bhagavan Eka Asidam Agra, right? The Lord is one, Eka. He's also one. Before anything, there was only God, and He was alone, right? I give a translation. Bhagavan, the Lord of all living beings, existed prior to creation as one without a second, right? Before the Lord of all beings, before there were any beings, He existed alone before anything, right? Mhm. What did it say? It is by His will only that creation is made possible. And again, everything merges into Him. Creation comes from Him. At the end, everything again returns back into Him. Uh, uh, where's the sense? The Supreme Self is, and that being or that power is known by many names, right? Next verse. He, the one Lord, right? Ikarat, again, the one Lord, right? Is Sava Esha Tada Drishta, Na Pasya Drishyam Ekarat, right? He is the one he is the one seer, right? He's consciousness, right? And at that time, he did not see anything else. There was nothing else to see, right? He, the one Lord, the seer at the time, did not see anything because there was nothing to see, right? There was no creation yet. He thought, why, let my latent self, right? Or the Atman, that which is latent in me, maybe that's a way to say it, become manifest, right, by my Shakti, right? Supta Shakti, Asupta Drik. May the that which is hidden or unmanifest by my Shakti become manifest. And then he names the Shakti. Uh, 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 that power of the all-seeing Lord is called Maya. right? The one and all seeing, the one who sees everything. That's going to be important to the very next verse we're going to read from the Devi, right? Having the nature of being neither real nor unreal, right? That self, it's called that power by which he makes the unmanifest manifest into the world, and therefore the unseen becomes seeable by him as as a supreme consciousness, right? That is called Maya, and that Maya has the nature of being neither true, neither real nor unreal. Asaratmika. Its essence is sat asat. Exact same language that from the Upanishads, having language here from the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? By which, and it's by this that by which he creates this world, right? So that's it. In other words, that Maya, which creates the world, is controlled by him. It's wielded by him. That's almost the definition of a supreme being in these traditions, right? In theistic Shaktism, so this text comes out of a theistic Shakti tradition, right? The Devi, of course, is the one who wields this power. But here, it's a type of Shaktism. This is a very tantric form of Shaktism, and with a Vedic undertones, right? That she not only in the Devi Bhagavatam, in the Devi Gita, Bhuvaneshwari does not only wield the power of Maya, right? She is the power of Maya. And that's, I think, I sometimes call, I mean, I don't want to use the word sophisticated Shaktism, as in because, but it's a very developed form of Shaktism, where there's no Shaktiman and Shakti. There's somebody who, the power and the powerful. She is power, and she is the powerful. She wields her own power, right? It's not her own power. I mean, she itself is the power that she wields, right? That's very important, right? I have in the notes, I want to read just a few notes from this. For Shaktas, with their affirming cosmological perspective, Maya is basically a positive, creative, magical energy of the goddess that brings forth the universe, rather than a deceiving power that that ensnares individuals in the false realm of the world and hinders their enlightenment. A common Advaitic interpretation of Maya. For Shaktas, it's her. And it's a wonderful power. It's by this power that she creates and does everything, right? So we have a pro Maya perspective. We even say Maha Mayi Ki Jai and glorifying Holy Mother, right? In that sense, right? She is a supreme Maya, right? So let's look at our verse. So I like to I chose our I always try to find verses pictures that to illustrate, or at least we have a picture of her as we're trying to get some philosophy in our head. We can also have some devotional contemplation of the goddess's form. And as you remember, in the midst of all this philosophy, the gods are having a revelation, a darshan, a vision of the goddess, right? So this is a beautiful piece that it's just one that I found. I had it in my files. Right click online, when you see something and you save it. This is called Devi Darshan, the vision of the goddess by Ananda Vyadvik, right? Has a few sites out there that will have some of his art very beautifully. What does it say? Evaṃ nānāvidhāni syurnāmāni nigamādiṣu tasyā jaḍa-tvaṃ dṛśyatvaṃ-jñāna-nāśāt tato'satī evaṃ nānāvidhāni syurnāmāni nigamādiṣu tasyā jaḍa-tvaṃ dṛśyatvaṃ-jñāna-nāśāt tato'satī. Right, and Mackenzie Brown's translation. Such are its various names found in the Vedic and other texts. Since Maya is something we can perceive, it has a nature of non-conscious matter. Since knowledge destroys it, it is not truly existent. So the first part's important. Such are its various names found in the Vedic and other sacred texts. Here it goes, nigamas. We have the agamas. We simply think of like agamas are like tantras. We call them agamas. Some of the devotional texts and are also in the category of agama. And nigama is usually referring to the Vedic texts or Vedic as in the Vedas, as well as texts that are Vedic, means in relation to the Vedas, right? That claim the Vedas. These are nigamas are orthodox schools. They accept the authority of the Vedas like that. So the nigama text. So many of these traditional texts there's many different names for Maya, right? Um, uh, uh, and if the point of this chapter is to get the cosmo to get a world, how to explain a world, right, according to one's understanding of Maya, it's going to be how you think what the world is and how we get a world, right? Every different school, like in the opening verses, it's by my own power. That's non-different from me. It's inherent within me. From me evolves everything. And so, what is the world then? The world is her manifestation, right? The one becoming many. We use that language a lot in Shaktism, right? Right. But here she's going to what was the last definition here? uh, uh, while those who contemplate the doctrine of the Vedas, Vedantins, declare her to be powerful avidya, right? So the last of her list is Advaita Vedanta, and so she's going to spend the next few moments, right, defining Maya in the language of Advaita Vedanta. And this actually, I have struggled with this, not because I don't mind the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta. I'm very fascinated by it, and I've done in my youth. Haven't done it in a long time, but I did an intense study as best I could with my young developing mind of proper Advaita philosophy, classical, both popular forms of Advaita as well as more classical Shankara's commentary type of Advaita Vedanta. Um, But it seems so strange that this is what she spends her time on in the text, right? It's good. 4 or 5 verses or more, arguing very aggressively, using strong statements, right, about the nature of Maya as not real, right, as not eternal, as not her. She just said that it's none different from her a few verses back, but now she's arguing along a different line. And because one of the things, this is the the theme of this is how the world, how us and the world evolve out of her. There's a couple different ways that Vedanta does this. One is by reflection and one is by evolution, right? And so she's primarily going to be using the evolutionary tradition coming from the Upanishads and the like. And so she's developing it. So we can take it for what it is. We should understand different schools of thought, but it seems a little bit strange that this is presented here, right? An answer could be is that it's part of that Sanskritization project, right? And that the Advaita schools of Vedanta at the time when this text was forming, right, taking shape, had a lot of prestige, and right, and by using the language, quotes, and arguments of Advaita Vedanta, it adds prestige to the text itself, right? It could have just been who the scribes and people who were composing these texts, what they were interested in, right? But they go back and forth. They use different things, right? How do so let's look at that. So that's the first part that there are various names for Maya on these different texts. Now she's giving her beginning, right? Since Maya is something we can perceive, right? Uh, it has a nature of non-conscious matter, right? So if we can see, so this is a very classic Vedantic, Advaita Vedanta technique, right? To know the difference and to emphasize the difference between um, uh, uh, the seer and the seen, right? We would say the subject and an object and its objects, right? In formal, and here actually uses the word is dṛśya, Let me find, let me get the where I broke it down for myself here. Nigamādiṣu tasyā jaḍa-tvaṃ dṛśya-tvāj-jñāna-nāśāt. So tasyā jaḍa-tvaṃ dṛśyatvaṃ. It can, because it can be seen, it cannot, then it becomes, it says tasyā jaḍa. Jaḍa means unconscious, inert, right? Because it can be seen, it's automatically in the category of inert, right? Of unconscious. Because I'm the conscious entity, right? My awareness is consciousness, right? And I see this cup, or I see my screen, right? Anything, I see one of my thoughts, or I see this world, right? Those are objects, and those things, this cup, I'm living, and I'm living and conscious, and I'm seeing something that's not conscious, right? Anything I perceive is an object, a material object, and therefore not conscious. This is the idea, right? So Maya is seen, therefore jaḍa, right? Therefore unconscious, right? So the word is dṛśya and jaḍa. If it's seen, it is unconscious, right? Atman, not here mentioned, is the seer, or the drig. There, the seen is dṛśya in Sanskrit. These are technical terms, dṛśya, and the seer is drig, right? And drig, if the dṛśya, the seen, is jaḍa, unconscious or inert, right? The the seer, drig, is conscious, caitanya. These are the terms that are used, caitanya, right? There's a text called the Drig Drisha Viveka, right? It's 46 verses. It's an Advaita Vedantic text. It's got the discrimination or the analysis between the seer and the seen, right? So that's a very important methodology in Vedanta, right? As a technique, a meditation technique to find the seer, right? And not get lost in the scene, to find this, to notice a distinction. And we can do it all the time. Something we think is real, something we think is conscious. No, we think if I'm conscious of it, I'm conscious. That is not conscious. It's something in consciousness that I'm aware of, right? In the footnotes there's little tiny, some little, very small print footnotes. I'll read it just for the sake of for if you don't have the book. If you do have it, you can. This section is so philosophically complicated that it could be beneficial to go through the commentary and the foot, and especially the not just the comment, the notes, the annotations, or some of the important stuff is in the annotations here, right? He says for the Pendigram says for Advaitins, whatever is an object of knowledge, a perception, dṛśya, is considered inert and non-conscious, and jaḍa, and is radically distinguished from the conscious knower or subject, the Atman, right? In Indian philosophy, is Dr. Radhakrishnan, S. Radhakrishnan, who was important philosopher in India, and one of the first, I think he was the first president of India, and also came to the West and taught in university, a very important person. He points out in Shankaracharya holds that the distinctions between reality and seeming, substance and show, is identical with that between subject and object. While the objects perceived are unreal, the Atman, which perceives, is not itself perceived. It perceives but is not self-perceived, right, is real. When distinguishing waking objects from dream ones, Shankara urges that the two, insofar as they are objects of consciousness, are unreal. So in dream, we don't think the objects in dreams are real, right? But we think the objects of waking are real. But both of them are in the same category as objects of consciousness, right? And therefore both unreal. Arguing Shankaracharya uses these examples. Also, another footnote. These footnotes are important. I don't spend a lot of time reading out loud footnotes, but these are important, right? The quality of being knowable belongs not only to the manifest world, but also to its cause, Maya. So not only the things in this world are knowable, perceivable, and therefore jaḍa, but also to the power that creates them. That is also knowable, and therefore also not real in the sense, not conscious at least in the sense, right? Maya, however, even from the Vedic perspective, is not absolutely unreal. He mentions neither real nor unreal, right? Just that it's not absolutely existent, but is rather neither sat nor asat. We've and the Bhagavatam mentioned that, and the Upanishads mentioned that, right? So that's I mean, I mean, I suggest that you practice this dṛśya viveka as an experiment, right? To notice a difference between, to discriminate between that which is a seer, who is a seer, and the seen, right? Because we don't notice these things, and philosophically it may be very important. I was trained, it's like I'm not strong in this anymore because my tendency, my focus, the philosophy that I tend to find the most nourishing is not this one anymore, right? But there was a time when there's early tutorship of certain teachers where this was very much focused between the knower and anything known. Sri Ramakrishna also describes this as one path. And the path of knowledge is a path of, we could neti, not this, right? And this is one of the ways we think, oh, if the self is the seer, not the seen. So anything seen, that's not the self. What about this body? Not the self. What about this mind? Not the self. What about the functions of the body and mind? Not the self. Right? So we do like that. Or you can either do, or between the gross and the subtle, between cause and effect, between the permanent and the impermanent, all these different ways to try to get it, because Brahman is supposed to be permanent, supposed to be subtle, not gross, the seer, not the seen, like this, right? So these are the practices, right? So also from his main commentary, I'll read something from here too. In the Shakta view, right? Because this is the Shakta view presented just 10 verses, 9 verses earlier, right? But this is also a Shakta view because the Devi is speaking it in the Shakta text, right? The thing, it's claiming it as an aspect of the Shakta view. But the reason it's a little strange because it seems so different from just the verses before it and verses coming in further chapters, right? In the Shakta view, Maya is not simply an insentient force, but a conscious and willful facet of the goddess's personality, not just the goddess's power and insentient power that the goddess uses and other forms of theism, right? It is Maya is itself conscious, right, and willful facet of the goddess's personality. Somewhat paradoxically, it is a non-dualist schools of Advaita emphasizing the acosmic view of reality and characterizing the realm of Maya as false that often stresses the greatest difference between Maya and the Supreme. Advaita objectifies Maya, right? She's an object. It's an object, therefore not conscious, always inert, right? It objectifies Maya, viewing it as inert and insentient, jaḍa, over and against supreme conscious subject that is Brahman or Atman. By way of contrast, the Devi Bhagavatam more often than not presents a Shakta viewpoint, asserts that Maya is the very essence of the Supreme Brahman. So in other places in the text, Maya para Brahma Surupini. That's what it says. Maya is the very essence of the Supreme Brahman. That's a direct quote, right? Right? Right. And the world without Maya would ever be unconscious and inert. Maya brings consciousness, right? So these are typical Shakta things, but here she's using classical, and what I sometimes, not just Advaita or Advaita Vedanta, I call it harsh Advaita. It's a radical harsh Advaita Vedanta, right? Also uh, at the danger of making stratifying and stacking philosophical systems, what I call high Shaktism, the seer and the seen is like in the Advaita Vedanta, are the distinction is all important between the seer and the seen and consciousness. This only the seer is conscious, not the seen. Where the Atman is conscious, Brahman is consciousness, not the seen, like this, right? In high Shaktism, the seer and the seen are not two aspects, are but two aspects of the same reality, right? Right. So um, um, the reality is behind both the seer and the seen. The one reality takes on these two forms of seer and seen, rather than the reality being the seer, and the seen is in some sense lower and unreal. The reality has taken both these forms as both seer and seen. This is what I consider a type of tantric Advaita, Shakta Advaita, right? From the commentary, he says the goddess in the above verse, this verse right here, right? Um, in the Devi Gita ignores for the moment the Shakta's perspective, adopting a radical Advaita interpretation by drawing a sharp distinction between herself and Maya. This distinction is characterized here in some as characterized here is sometimes somewhat at odds with the earlier notion of difference and non-difference suggested in verse 5, which we mentioned about the heat and fire, that verse there. The goddess now denies the non-difference, utilizing standard Advaitic visual images and metaphors that stress the differences, right? As pure as the pure subject of consciousness, variously called Chaitanya. In these verses, it will be called Chaitanya, Sambit, Jnana, and Chit. These are the words be used in this cluster to describe consciousness, right? She likens herself to Maya, the realm of inert material objects, referred as dṛśya, the seen, as jaḍa, inert, dull, and sentient. Pure conscious self is never an object of perception or knowledge, but is instead the eternal seer or witness, shakshin, observing the ephemeral, the false entities of empirical existence, right? So in this verse, that's the main point being made here, that the difference between seer and seen, and the seen Maya is seen, and the seen is always an object, and objects are never conscious, right? But she doesn't just say that. She also says, right, since knowledge destroys it, is not truly existent, right? Something exists also by sat also means that it has to be eternal. Maya, once you have proper knowledge, Maya disappears, right? This is the claim of Advaita. It's ajnana, ignorance. So ignorance is destroyed by knowledge. When knowledge is destroys it, then Maya cannot be really existing in that sense. It's not eternal, and so it's neither conscious nor eternal. And these are two things that the self has to be, right? So next verse 12, right? Yeah. This is a painting I just found last night, actually. Bhuvaneshwari by Layastana from Kerala. I found their art site, and there are many forms like this, different goddesses within yantras. This seems to be the style of the artist, but it's a beautiful picture of two-arm form of Bhuvaneshwari. Right. Caitanyasya na dṛśyatvaṃ dṛśyatve tve jaḍameva tat svaprakāśaṃ cha caitanyam na pareṇa prakāśitam. Right? Consciousness is not something we can perceive. What we perceive is indeed non-consciousness. Consciousness is self-luminous. Nothing else illuminates. It illumines it. Caitanyasya na dṛśyatvaṃ dṛśyatva jaḍameva tat svaprakāśaṃ cha caitanyam na pareṇa prakāśitam. Right. So this is a sometime in our forms, in experiential form, in the forms of mysticism, the mystical communities, religious communities that we're likely involved in, right? And the teachings we're likely involved in. We sometimes think, oh, we can be like, what is it? An atma, uh, a knower of Brahmagyani or Atmagyani, right? That we can, in other words, we can experience God. We can experience the self. We can experience Brahman, right? but and there are schools that hold this, and we are that's our sometimes our inspiration that we want to experience the self, or experience God, or experience Brahman, right? In this harsh form of Vedanta, philosophically harsh form of Vedanta, right? That's an impossibility because Brahman is never God, consciousness, Brahman, the self, is never an object of experience. It is always, by definition, the experiencer, right? So this is uh, uh, and so Swami Vivekananda in his Bhakti Yoga, knowing these definitions, he says in devotion, we as if we make of the experiencer, we turn the experiencer into an object of consciousness, into an object of experience, right? By giving her a name, a form, qualities, right? Those names, forms, and qualities point to her, right? Point back, but really point back to the perceiver. The perceiver is the essential thing, right? Um, it says anything that can be seen, what we perceive is jaḍa, is unconscious. Actually, it's interesting, non-consciousness. This is a language, I left it as it is from Mackenzie Brown. We would say unconscious, probably the way we non-consciousness is. I don't think that's a thing. I can't imagine that as a thing, but I'll leave the language. Consciousness is not something that we can perceive because it's a perceiver, right? And therefore anything we perceive is indeed not consciousness, right? Or unconscious. It's both unconscious and therefore not consciousness, right? And then it says swaprakāśaṃ. Swaprakāśaṃ, it is self-luminous. Consciousness, caitanyam, consciousness is self-illuminating. It does not illuminate, consciousness illuminates everything, and nothing illuminates it. It is only illuminating. And therefore it's self-illuminating, like self-illuminating that show itself by the fact that it illuminates everything, by its radiance illuminates everything. It can be known as the fact that everything's being illuminated, everything is being witnessed. That is the way we know the witness. That's how we know consciousness, right? It shines. The Upanishad said, it's shining, everything shines, right? We see the world through the light of the sun and moon and stars and electricity, and sun, moon, stars, and fire. But how do we see sun, moon, fire? By consciousness. So the sun, moon, and fire is illumined by a consciousness, right? So in that sense, it illuminates even the sun, right? But the light of this can never turn back on itself, right? When I was one of some of my first teachers, right? They would try to tell me that you have to know the knower, right? You have to perceive the perceiver. It's like, so that school of Vedanta held that, the purpose is to know the knower, not philosophically, right? But by having experience, have like and then one Swamiji, he said, if you have a mirror shining the light of the sun, the mind is like the mirror, the mind shines the light of the sun on this, and shines the light of the sun on this, and shines the light of the sun on that. And by that, you see all these things, right? But the mirror can also shine back at the sun and reveal the sun. Right. And so that was the impetus for this type of spiritual practice and inquiry. But this is, like I said, a philosophically harsher interpretation, right? A more sharp interpretation, that there's nothing that the self can never be known as an object of knowledge, can never be perceived as an object of perception, right? Consciousness self-luminous, nothing else illuminates it, right? So our perception, the fact of our perception, right, points to the reality of the perceiver, right? Go to a little bit of, messy and not very careful quote of like, I think, therefore I am, right? Thinking itself proves a thinker, right? Like something like this, right? Um, um, so this school of thought would say that for knowledge of the self or Brahman, we need only to understand the phenomenon of perception, right? We are awareness, right? And so I don't know if Vijaya is in our group today, right? And I was joking today, I'm going to tell Vijaya's favorite story, right? She mentioned the other day that's not her favorite story, but of the 10th man. This is given in the Panchadasi. I'm pretty sure it's given in the Panchadasi and other Vedantic stories, texts, right? And it's in the story. If you don't know it, I mean, it's worthwhile to know. It's a traditional teaching story, and that I'll tell it my way. The way it was told to me. 10. Let's say imagine 10 friends go and let's go for a swim and for a picnic, and so they swim across a river, right? And they get across the river was a little more deep and wide than they thought. So at the end of the side of the river where they're going to have their picnics, they say, well, let's make sure we're all okay, right? We make sure we all got here okay. So one of them is all count. They know there are 10 of them. 10 friends went for the swim, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's only 9 of us, right? No, no, so no, no. I reckon I don't see anybody missing. You count. Somebody else count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? And everybody is counting, and they see that only 9 people are counted, and they begin to think, well, we don't know, remember which one, but one of us must have died, been washed away, and been lost in the river, right? And they begin to cry and lament at the loss of their friend, right? And watching this, there's always a Paramahansa or a saint or somebody, a friend watching from a distance, and seeing them crying, these people crying, goes up to them, brothers, what's happened, right? And they say the story, there was 10 of us, right? And now there's only 9. We keep counting many times we count, we find only 9. So one of us, we don't know which one, but one of us has died, right? And so we're lamenting how we're going to have to tell their wife the whole thing, right? Even though we don't know whose wife. So the person who sees them, he immediately sees what happened. He can see that he can see how many people are there, and he tells one of them, "Count again. Let me see you count this time, right? I'll make sure you got it right." And the guy goes 1, 2, touches the head of each person. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. See? Right? There's only 9. And then the friend takes that man's hand and puts it on his own head. It says 10. Right? You forgot to count yourself. The counter is also one of the, so we, in noticing everything, we don't notice the noticer. In seeing everything, we don't notice a seer, right? So just for the fact that we can count 9 people means there's a 10th person. The fact that we see the world of name and form means that there's a seer, there's a self, right? So in that sense, the self can be known this way, right? Let's move to the next verse here. Okay. So this picture is just because I want a nice picture of moth. It doesn't fit this. It doesn't necessarily fit the verse, the scene. But let me remember what this is. Verse 3 will end, I think, probably here. It's getting late. Annavasta dosha sattana svenapi prakāśitam karma katri virodha syat tasmat tad dipavat svayam. It does not even the self does not even illuminate itself. So that's the what is it? Conscious is not something we can perceive. What can be perceived is indeed not conscious. Conscious is self-luminous. Nothing can illuminate it cannot even illuminate itself. Nothing can illuminate it. It cannot even illuminate itself. For that would lead to the fallacy of infinite regress. That's a philosophical point in the ancient world. As an agent and an object acted upon are distinct entities. So consciousness itself, like a lamp, dot, dot, dot. I'm going to have to finish the sentence and I'm going to switch to the next verse here. While shining brightly, illuminates what is other than itself. Know this, O mountain king. The sentence continues into the next verse by most readings, actually. Swami Vijnananda and Swami Satyananda treat each verse separately, and that changes the structure. I trust, looking at it, I don't know, my Sanskrit's not advanced enough to be able to know how I'll just, for the sake of translation, consistently, I'm using Mackenzie Brown's translation, which makes us go across 2 verses, right? It does not even illuminate itself, for that would lead to the fallacy of infinite regress. Annavasta is infinite regress. If if it illuminated itself, that would imply that there is another consciousness to witness that illumination, right? So again, you end up with that consciousness is the main thing, right? There's a foot in the footnote. It says Mahadevan. This is an old commentator on the Panchadasi. That gets there's commentators upon commentators who gloss commentaries of, that's the way this information comes down. Mahadevam says, in summarizing the first chapter of Panchadasi, pure consciousness cannot become the object of any other experience, and so it is self-luminous. To say that it is its own object is a manifest contradiction, and the assertion that there is another consciousness which cognizes it lands us in infinite regress. So, and in the Panchadasi itself, there's a verse from the Panchadasi. No, I'll leave it there. Actually, interesting. These are verses almost quoting the Panchadasi directly, and the Panchadasi is 1386. Something along those lines, 1390, something like that, in that period of time, most likely written by Vidyarayana. It's a small and powerful text on Advaita Vedanta and an argument philosophical in Vedanta. But the language is if direct quotes or very clearly rewordings of Panchadasi, things from the Panchadasi. Right. So what does that mean? Of course, as if we do a little bit of critical analysis of text, right, that would make that these at least these verses, maybe not the whole text, were composed or added after the Panchadasi was written, right? Most likely that's how we usually think of it. Either the goddess herself did it, or the or whoever the scholars who were the cause of putting these verses together in this form, right? Which makes it about 650 years old, right? At least, minimum, I'm sorry, 50 years old, right? It's a way of dating the text. So the text has to come after that. If it's a direct quote, you can't quote a text before the text is written. I mean, you could claim that. I mean, then you would be kind of like prophetic claims and things like that, which we're not trying to make here. But anyways, interesting. It's one of the ways we know when this text took on its form is when she's quoting the Upanishad. If he quotes, is there rephrasing something that was developed by Shankara? We know it's past Shankaracharya. There's one way of dating the text like this, right? So as an agent and an object acted upon are distinct entities, right? So something I do to something else, those are two separate things, right? So consciousness itself, like a lamp, next verse, while shining brightly, right, illuminates what is other than itself, right? Right. Oh, know this, O Mountain King. Prakāśa mannamanyasyam. Shining, it shines upon something other than itself, right? Bastakam enlightening. Vidhi Parvata, O mountain, that's us, right? Know this, right? Right. So this is the foundation of what she's going to say in the next section, pretty much on how that one consciousness through the power of Māya, which is unconscious somehow, right? By using this like that, evolves this world of name and form, right? But as she starts talking about evolution of name and form, she's going to revert back at the end of it to a more Shakta, organic Shakta perspective. Right. Thus have I demonstrated that consciousness, right? Atta-eva cha nityatvam siddha sambit tanur mama. So prakāśa mannamānyasyam pashakam vidhi parvata atta-eva cha nityatvam siddha sambit tanur mama. I haven't been practicing, so please forgive me, but just hearing, I think these verses are meant to be recited, that they have their own sound to them. They're meant to be engaged this way. So it's good to practice a little bit. So, atta eva sa nityatvam sira sambit tanur mama. Right. I have established that sambit, here the word sambit. I like the word sambit as for a name for consciousness. Right. There's Atman, Chaitanya, sambit, and chit are the four ways in these verses consciousness is being described. So this is an example of the sambit. Tantra uses this term a lot for consciousness, and also as a epithet of the goddess, that she is our very consciousness, or our consciousness is her, right? So I've demonstrated that consciousness, belonging to my own nature, is eternal. So in the Panchadasi, again, she's quoting Panchadasi, right? In the Panchadasi, consciousness is referred to as the witness. Is said to. So this is actually very interesting. This is a nice example. In Panchadasi, consciousness referred this from the a footnote in the commentary. Is referred to as a witness. Shakshan is said to illuminate the agent, act, and object acted upon. It illuminates the agent, act, and object acted upon, just as a lamp, this is the example given, in a dance hall reveals the patron, the agent or ego, the audience, the objects, and the dancer, the intellect. Even when these are absent, means there's no, if a lamp's on a stage and there's nobody on the stage, there's no patron, there's no audience, and there's no dancer, right? That light continues to shine, right? Thus, pure consciousness endures even when the objects of consciousness disappear, right? So in the next verse, which we won't, I think we'll stop here. The next verse, that same notion is then extended not just to objects of consciousness, but to states of consciousness, right? And in the Mandukya Upanishad, verse 3, 4, 5 describes the different states of consciousness as dreaming, waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, right? So there's something that consciousness is eternal and changing, and witnesses not just objects but also states, right? These different states, that there is a witness to all those states that transcends those states. Even states of consciousness are objects of consciousness, right? So that's the next verse, right? This idea will be extended, right? So I think, let me see here, make sure. Yes, that's the next verse. The visible world appears, as a hint for next time. The visible world appears and disappears constantly in the various states of waking, dream, and deep sleep. Pure consciousness never experiences such fluctuations, right? So that's the next verse. We'll end it here. Let me get out of this, right? So we're doing big. The definitions are, the philosophy is very Advaitic, right? And I have to tell you, this is not the first time I've given classes on the Devi Gita. I began to give classes on the Devi Gita here at Kali Mandir to a small group of people on Sunday nights. I don't know, 20 years ago, something like this, right? And 20 years ago, I mean, we've all hopefully grown up and matured and gained knowledge, right? And so perhaps it's also that I bit off more than I can chew. The text is very um, um, I think I had enough knowledge to make up to this point meaningful to our students that were studying together, right? Background of Shakti philosophy and the interpretation, the meaningful interpretation of the iconography, of the sadhanas the gods mentioned, the gods engaged in. I remember still, even in these talks, I repeated some of the things that I had thought about 20 plus years ago. And we got to this point. Even here, I did okay, right? But then right after, when this is the basis for the evolution, the doctrine of evolution into the world, the Vedantic doctrine of evolution, right? Two things. One is that it was beyond my expertise, right? That I had been trained in these things, right? But also it was like I couldn't understand the why of it, right? And I stumbled on the why of it, so much so that eventually I'm going, I think this is not, maybe not the best text to discuss, and we switched to Srimad Bhagavatam. And I gave talks on Srimad Bhagavatam for over 20 years, right? So we're getting very abstract philosophy, and I didn't quite know why the philosophy was being presented. And so let's talk the basic stories, the basic and the bhakti tradition. Bhagavatam illuminates bhakti, and that's more our line anyways. So I stumbled here. So I'm anxious to get through these verses and not stumble. Now I can talk, I mean, I know the school of Vedanta. I can describe the school of Vedanta, but this isn't a class on Advaita Vedanta, right? That's not. I mean, there's great classes and there's great speakers on Advaita Vedanta, right? I can give it this type of class. This is a class on Shaktism as as presented in the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam and the Devi Gita, right? But because of this Sanskritization, right, and the prestige of the Advaita schools, right, the goddess herself in her mouth is speaking something that 4 verses, 10 verses earlier, she didn't say, she said the opposite of. So we have to do this organically, right? And we could think it's just maybe it's just that. Maybe it just goes inserted or the due to the prestige and of the philosophy it was engaged in. But there may be something more because remember there's a long list. Some see Maya like this, some see Maya like this, some see Maya like this, something Maya like this, right? And there's another way to see Maya, right? All of which are ways, whatever, however you define Maya, the power that how the one becomes many, you're gonna come up with an explanation how the one became many, right? And this is one such explanation, right? And Swami Ambikananda last night we're talking about the bigger picture here, right? Is that even if she's defining these things, right? Who is she talking to? She's talking to the gods, right? So she's talking who. So these gods are objects in her consciousness. Do the gods exist? It's like there's larger principles. Next week, I want to fold some of these things in, right? That that even in the intricacies of this more careful and radical or harsh Vedanta Advaita, right? That even that no matter what, even the discussion about this takes place in a world of multiplicity, of the one becoming many, and you're hearing me and me speaking, right? Even the arguments for Advaita, right? And for the absolute we're in this world of the Divine Mother's Maya, the Maya Mother Shakti. So I mean, there's some beautiful things that maybe next week we'll read. I have to get him Swami Ambikananda some things that Sri Ramakrishna talked about this very point about Advaitins think this, but even they are in the realm of Maya, they're in the realm of Shakti, right? Even the discussion of Advaita is in the realm, if in the realm of discussion, in the realm of experience, and realm of teaching, we're in her beautiful realm. So there's an organic way. I'm struggling to find the organic way in which this philosophy fits into the goddess's larger message within the text. So I'm also out of practice at this, so I appreciate your patience, right? As I get my rhythm back, I realize I have to jump in a section where it's the next section gets very extremely technical of how the elements evolve out to each other. So that could be fun, God is willing. So thank you for your kind attention. I went longer than I wanted to, but that's the way it always is. Are there any comments or questions or discussions? You just have to click in or something, or Ambikananda's watching or something. Anybody? No. Well, that's making it very easy for me. Either you guys are fully convinced that Maya does not exist and is unconscious, and yeah, good. All right. Hariom Tat Sat. So we have some announcements perhaps we could make. Today is a holy day. Today is the birthday of Baba Haridas, a great Vaishnava saint. That by God's grace, many of us at Kali Mandir had darshan and had his blessings and instructions. He died some years back. He lived at Mount Madonna Center, or He didn't live there, but the Mount Madonna Center in Santa Cruz Mountains is built by him and his disciples. Very wonderful souls. We're remembering him today. We have a retreat coming up at the end of the next month, at the beginning of next month, at the beginning of the first weekend of Amaji, when my brain is not working.
May.
May, thank you. The first weekend of May, we have a retreat to the school. Those of you who are students, you probably received something. If you haven't received something, please let me know. It will be here at Kali Mandir over 2 days, and the theme will be music and sound and mantra, the sonic. It's called Sangeet Yoga will be our theme. We're excited about it, and especially for some of the local devotees, it's easy. But you come here regularly. But many devotees, many of our students are long distance and have never been here, so it's an opportunity for some students to come together and meet each other in person. Some of you, a lot of you only know each other from little pictures on the edge of your Zoom screen. There'll be a way to meet each other. So what else is coming? These are the two main things. Next Saturday is Ram Navami. No, 2 Saturdays from now is Ram Navami. The Kali Mandir will have some bhajan program at Ram Navami. That's what's coming up. All right. Jai Sri Guru Maharaj Ji ki jai. Jai Mahamaya ki jai. Swamiji Maharaj Ji ki jai. Bhuvaneshwari Mai ki jai. Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. All right. Let me see who's there. Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Good night, everyone. Good night, Anandaji. Good night, Kali Charan. Edmund, very happy. It must be. It's 9, 8, 9, 10, 10:30 where you are. Edmund's joining us after a long time. Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Nanda Das. Good. Hariom Richard. Jai Ma. Jai Ma, Krishna Chaitra. Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Om Tat Sat. Okay, Jai Ma.